Victoria Zimmerman's phone alarm blared at 5 in the morning, jolting her awake from a dream where she was drowning in spreadsheets and venue brochures. She groaned, fumbling to silence the offensive noise before it woke her roommate in the next bedroom. 4 hours of sleep wasn't enough, but the annual company retreat for Falcon Industries wasn't going to plan itself, and her boss wanted the final presentation by 9 sharp. "Coffee first, then crisis," she mumbled to herself, padding into her tiny kitchen in the apartment she could barely afford on her event coordinator salary. Victoria had been with Falcon Industries, one of the world's leading renewable energy companies, for 3 years now. While she loved her job organizing corporate events and conferences, this retreat was on another level entirely. For the first time since joining the company, she'd been entrusted with planning the annual executive retreat, a prestigious assignment that could make or break her career trajectory. As the coffee brewed, she opened her laptop on the kitchen counter, staring at the half-finished presentation. The retreat was scheduled for the exclusive Whispering Pines Resort in the Catskills, a stunning location with pristine forests and lakeside views. Victoria had chosen it specifically because of Falcon Industries' commitment to environmental sustainability. Her phone buzzed with a text from her assistant, Megan. "Don't panic, but the Whispering Pines catering manager just called. They need final menu confirmation today, not Friday." Victoria groaned. One more fire to put out before her presentation to the CEO, the notoriously demanding Kieran Frost. In the 3 years she'd worked at Falcon, she'd only interacted with him directly a handful of times, each encounter leaving her both intimidated and oddly fascinated. At 35, Kieran Frost had built Falcon Industries from a small solar panel startup into a global renewable energy powerhouse worth billions. The business magazines called him brilliant, ruthless, and enigmatic. Employees called him exacting, visionary, and impossible to please. Victoria just called him Mr. Frost, and tried not to stare at his striking blue eyes or the way his tailored suits fit his athletic frame so perfectly. After a quick shower and an outfit change settling on a navy pencil skirt and cream blouse that projected professional confidence, Victoria headed to the office, her mind racing with all the details she still needed to finalize. The Falcon Industries headquarters occupied a sleek, energy-efficient skyscraper in downtown Manhattan. Victoria's modest office was on the 20th floor, nestled among the other support departments. The executive suites, including Kieran Frost's corner office, occupied the top floor, a place Victoria visited only when summoned. She spent the morning finalizing her presentation, confirming details with vendors, and putting out fires. By 8:45, she had everything ready and headed to the elevator for her 9 o'clock meeting with the CEO. Victoria checked her reflection in the elevator's mirrored wall, tucking a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. At 28, she still sometimes felt like she was playing dress-up in the corporate world, but she'd earned this opportunity through hard work and dedication. This retreat could be her stepping stone to a senior position. The executive floor was noticeably quieter than her bustling department. Kieran's assistant, an impeccably dressed woman named Elaine, greeted her with a tight smile. "He's running a few minutes behind. The Tokyo call ran long," she explained. "You can wait in the conference room." Victoria nodded, trying to hide her nerves as she set up her presentation in the glass-walled meeting room with sweeping views of the city. She was arranging her notes when the door opened and Kieran Frost walked in. "Miss Zimmerman," he said, his deep voice carrying across the room. "I hope I haven't kept you waiting long." Victoria stood quickly, almost knocking over her water bottle in the process. Not at all, Mr. Frost. Up close, Kieran was even more imposing than in passing. Tall, with broad shoulders and dark hair that had the perfect amount of sophisticated silver at the temples, he exuded authority and confidence. His eyes, an intense blue that bordered on stormy gray, studied her with interest. "I've been looking forward to seeing what you've come up with for the retreat," he said, taking a seat at the head of the table. "Your reputation in the events department is excellent." Victoria felt her cheeks warm at the unexpected compliment. "Thank you, sir. I've put together something I think aligns perfectly with Falcon's values and goals." For the next 30 minutes, Victoria presented her vision for the retreat. 3 days of team building, strategic planning, and relaxation at the eco-friendly Whispering Pines Resort. She'd arranged for sustainable activities, farm-to-table dining, and even a volunteer project to help restore a local watershed. Throughout her presentation, Kieran remained engaged, asking thoughtful questions and making notes. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Impressive work, Miss Zimmerman," he said finally. "You've captured exactly what I was hoping for." Relief flooded through her. "Thank you, Mr. Frost. However," he continued, "I'd like to make a few adjustments." Victoria's heart sank. "Of course. What did you have in mind?" "I think the retreat should be extended to 5 days instead of 3. And I'd like to add some additional activities, sailing on the lake, perhaps, and a more substantial team-building exercise." Victoria nodded, making notes. "I can certainly arrange that." "And one more thing," Kieran added, his expression unreadable. "I'd like you to attend the retreat as well." Victoria looked up, surprised. "Me? But the retreat is for executives and department heads. You've put together an ambitious program. I want you there to ensure it runs smoothly." His tone made it clear this wasn't a request. "Besides, you've earned a place at the table with this work." "Thank you, Mr. Frost. I'd be honored." As she gathered her materials, Victoria couldn't shake the feeling that there was something else behind his request, something in the way he'd watched her throughout the presentation, with an intensity that seemed to go beyond professional interest. "One more thing, Miss Zimmerman," Kieran said as she reached the door. "Would you be available to discuss some of these changes over dinner tonight? My schedule is quite tight and I'd like to finalize these details as soon as possible." Victoria froze, her hand on the door handle. "Dinner with the CEO?" "Of course," she managed to say, hoping her voice sounded steadier than she felt. "Whatever works best for you." "Excellent. I'll have my driver pick you up at 7. He turned his attention to his computer, effectively dismissing her. Walking back to her office, Victoria's mind raced. What had just happened? Was this a normal working dinner or something else? And why did her heart rate pick up at the thought of spending an evening with Kieran Frost? Back at her desk, Victoria's phone pinged with a calendar invitation. "Retreat planning dinner, 7 p.m. La Rivière." La Rivière was one of the most exclusive French restaurants in the city, with a 3-month waiting list for reservations. This was definitely not a casual working dinner. "You look like you've seen a ghost," said Megan, popping her head into Victoria's office. "How did the presentation go?" "Good. Really good, actually," Victoria replied, still staring at her phone. "He liked it so much he wants me to attend the retreat, and he's taking me to dinner tonight to discuss some changes." Megan's eyes widened. "Dinner with Kieran Frost at an actual restaurant, La Rivière," Victoria confirmed. "Holy crap, Vic. Do you know how many women in this building would kill to be in your shoes right now? The man's a billionaire, gorgeous and single." "It's a business dinner," Victoria insisted, though her stomach fluttered with something that didn't feel entirely professional. "And I need to figure out what to wear." The rest of the day passed in a blur as Victoria tried to focus on work while her mind kept wandering to her upcoming dinner. By 6, she was back in her apartment, tearing through her closet for something appropriate. She finally settled on a simple black dress that was elegant enough for an upscale restaurant, but not so formal that it suggested anything beyond a business dinner. She added a pair of pearl earrings her grandmother had given her for graduation and swept her hair into a loose updo. At precisely 7, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Car waiting downstairs, K. Frost." The sleek black town car was idling at the curb when Victoria stepped outside. The driver opened the door for her, and to her surprise, Kieran Frost was already inside. "Miss Zimmerman," he greeted her, his eyes taking in her appearance with obvious appreciation. "You look lovely." "Thank you," she replied, suddenly very aware of the confined space they were sharing. Without his suit jacket and with his tie loosened, Kieran looked less like the intimidating CEO and more like an attractive man taking her to dinner. "And please call me Victoria." "Victoria," he repeated, as if testing how her name felt. "Then you must call me Kieran, at least outside the office." The restaurant was everything Victoria had heard about: elegant, intimate, and clearly designed for patrons who valued privacy. The maitre d' greeted Kieran by name and led them to a secluded table overlooking the city lights. "I hope you don't mind," Kieran said once they were seated, "but I took the liberty of pre-ordering a tasting menu that highlights the chef's specialties." "Not at all," Victoria replied, taking a sip of the water that had materialized in front of her. "Though I have to admit, this seems like a very upscale venue for discussing retreat activities." Kieran's lips curved into a slight smile. "Perhaps I wanted a pleasant environment to discuss business, or perhaps I simply wanted to have dinner with you without the entire office speculating." Victoria nearly choked on her water. I don't understand." "I've been watching you for some time, Victoria," Kieran admitted, his voice lowered. "Your work is exemplary, but it's more than that. You bring a thoughtfulness to everything you do, a consideration for others that's rare in the corporate world." The waiter arrived with their first course, momentarily saving Victoria from having to respond. As they began to eat, Kieran steered the conversation to safer topics: the retreat logistics, her background before Falcon Industries, his vision for the company's future. By the time dessert arrived, a delicate chocolate soufflé they were meant to share, Victoria had almost forgotten the momentary awkwardness of his earlier admission. "So," she said, gathering her courage, "are there specific changes you wanted to discuss for the retreat, or was that just a pretext to have dinner?" Kieran regarded her with those intense blue eyes. "A bit of both, if I'm being honest. I do have some specific ideas for the retreat, but I could have easily sent those in an email." He paused. "I wanted to get to know you better, Victoria, away from the office hierarchy." Victoria felt her pulse quicken. "That's flattering, but I'm not sure it's appropriate." "Because I'm your boss?" Kieran asked directly. "Yes," he nodded thoughtfully. "A valid concern. Let me be clear. Your position at Falcon is secure regardless of anything that happens or doesn't happen between us personally. I'm interested in you, Victoria, but I would never use my position to pressure you." Victoria studied him, trying to detect any sign of insincerity. Finding none, she decided to be equally direct. "And what exactly are you interested in, Kieran?" "Getting to know you. Seeing if there's something here worth exploring." He gestured between them. "But only if you're comfortable with that." Victoria thought carefully before responding. The attraction was undeniable, had been since she'd first laid eyes on him years ago. But she'd worked too hard to risk her professional reputation. "I'm not opposed to getting to know each other better," she said finally. "But I want to be discreet, and I want to be sure this won't affect my career." "Agreed on both counts," Kieran replied, his expression softening. "And to demonstrate my sincerity, let's focus exclusively on the retreat plans tonight. No pressure, no expectations." True to his word, they spent the remainder of the evening discussing the upcoming retreat. Kieran had insightful suggestions for team-building activities and wanted to include a day focused on innovation and the future direction of Falcon Industries. When the town car dropped Victoria at her apartment later that night, Kieran walked her to the door but didn't attempt to come inside or even kiss her goodnight. "Thank you for dinner," she said, feeling strangely disappointed despite her earlier reservations. "Thank you for your company," he replied. "I look forward to working with you on the retreat, and perhaps when that's successfully behind us, we can revisit our earlier conversation." With that enigmatic statement, he bid her good night and returned to the waiting car, leaving Victoria to wonder what exactly she was getting herself into. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind of retreat preparations. Victoria coordinated with the resort, finalized activities, and worked with the executive team's assistants to ensure everyone's schedules were accommodated. Throughout it all, Kieran maintained a professional distance, their interactions limited to necessary meetings and email exchanges about the retreat. Victoria wasn't sure if she was relieved or disappointed. Their dinner had awakened something in her, an attraction she tried to ignore for years, now complicated by his explicit interest. But the space he was giving her seemed to confirm his sincerity about not pressuring her. The day before the retreat, Victoria was in her office packing up materials when her phone buzzed with a text from Kieran. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" she smiled, typing back. "As ready as I'll ever be. 20 executives in the woods, what could go wrong?" His response came quickly. "With you in charge, nothing will go wrong. See you at the helicopter." Victoria paused, rereading the text. Helicopter? The plan had been for executives to drive to the resort in company cars. Before she could question it, another text arrived. Change of plans. "Sending most of the team in cars, but you and I will take the helicopter to arrive early and ensure everything is set up. Elaine has updated your itinerary." Sure enough, when Victoria checked her email, there was an updated schedule instructing her to meet at the company's private helipad at 7 a.m. This wasn't entirely unusual for Kieran, who often traveled by helicopter to avoid city traffic, but it would be the first time she'd be alone with him since their dinner. The next morning dawned clear and perfect for flying. Victoria arrived at the helipad with her luggage and retreat materials, her stomach fluttering with a mix of nervousness about the retreat and anticipation about seeing Kieran again. He was already there, dressed more casually than she'd ever seen him, in dark jeans and a light blue button-down shirt that made his eyes seem even more intense. His face lit up when he saw her, a genuine smile replacing his usual serious expression. "Victoria," he greeted her, taking her bags. "Perfect timing. We're just about ready for takeoff." The helicopter ride was exhilarating, offering spectacular views as they left the city behind for the lush greenery of the Catskills. Kieran sat close beside her, occasionally pointing out landmarks below. Their conversation flowed easily, touching on work, but also venturing into more personal territory: their favorite books, places they'd traveled, dreams they still wanted to pursue. "I never expected to become a billionaire," Kieran admitted when she asked about his rapid rise in the business world. "I just wanted to make renewable energy more accessible. The money was a surprising side effect." "And now that you have it," Victoria asked, "what do you want next?" Kieran looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Things money can't buy: connection, purpose beyond work. Maybe even a partner to share it all with." The intensity in his gaze made Victoria's breath catch, But before she could respond, the pilot announced they were beginning their descent to the resort. Whispering Pines was even more beautiful in person than in the photos Victoria had studied. Nestled between mountains with a pristine lake at its center, the resort consisted of an elegant main lodge and scattered luxury cabins. As the helicopter touched down on the resort's private landing pad, Victoria could see staff waiting to greet them. Mr. Frost, Miss Zimmerman, the resort manager welcomed them. We're delighted to have Falcon Industries with us. Everything is prepared according to your specifications. Thank you, Harold, Victoria replied, immediately shifting into professional mode. I'd like to do a final walkthrough of all the spaces we'll be using. For the next few hours, Victoria and Kieran toured the resort, checking meeting rooms, dining areas, and activity locations. Working alongside him, Victoria was struck by how compatible they were. He was decisive but valued her input, and they often anticipated each other's thoughts. "You've done an incredible job with this," Kieran told her as they finished reviewing the welcome dinner arrangements. "I knew you were the right person for this project." "Thank you," Victoria replied, pleased by the compliment. "Though I'm still not sure why you wanted me at the retreat. Your event coordinator usually stays behind." Kieran's expression grew thoughtful. "Because you deserve to see your work in action. And because I wanted you here," he added, his voice lowering. "Is that so hard to believe?" Before Victoria could respond, Harold approached to inform them that the first cars of executives had arrived. The moment broken, they returned to their professional roles, greeting the arriving team members and directing them to their accommodations. The welcome dinner that evening was held in the main lodge's grand dining room, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the lake. Victoria had arranged for local musicians to provide subtle background music, and the chef had prepared a menu showcasing regional specialties. As she circulated among the executives, ensuring everything ran smoothly, Victoria frequently felt Kieran's eyes on her from his position at the head table. When she finally took her own seat placed strategically next to his, he leaned over to speak privately. "You're a natural at this," he observed. "Everyone's relaxed and enjoying themselves. That's the mark of a well-planned event." "The real test will be tomorrow's activities," Victoria replied, though she couldn't help feeling pleased. "That's when we'll see if my team-building exercises actually work." "I have complete faith in you," Kieran said, his hand briefly covering hers on the table. The casual touch sent a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the excellent wine being served. After dinner, many executives retired to their cabins to prepare for the early start the next day. Victoria was checking final details with the staff when Kieran approached her again. "Would you join me for a walk?" he asked. "The lake is beautiful at night and I could use some fresh air after all that food." Victoria hesitated, aware of curious glances from the few executives still lingering. "Is that a good idea? People will talk." "Let them," Kieran said simply. "We're colleagues discussing the retreat. Besides, I wanted to show you something." Curiosity won out, and Victoria found herself following Kieran along a well-lit path toward the lake. The night was perfect, warm with a slight breeze, the sky clear and filled with stars invisible in New York City. They walked in comfortable silence until they reached a small private dock extending into the water. The moon's reflection rippled across the lake's surface, creating a magical atmosphere. "This is where we'll have the innovation workshop on day 3, Kieran explained, gesturing to an elegant pavilion near the dock. "But that's not what I wanted to show you." He led her to the end of the dock where a small rowboat was tethered. "The resort manager mentioned this was here for guests to use. I thought maybe tomorrow evening after the day's activities we might take it out on the lake." Victoria looked from the boat to Kieran's hopeful expression. That sounds lovely, but what would the others think? That I'm taking my hard-working event coordinator out to thank her for a successful day, he replied, then added more softly. Or they might think exactly what's true, that I'm interested in spending time with you, Victoria, away from titles and corporate hierarchies. Victoria felt her resolve weakening. Here, away from the office and surrounded by natural beauty, it was harder to remember all the reasons she should maintain professional distance. I'd like that, she admitted finally. But we should get back before people start wondering where we disappeared to. As they walked back toward the lodge, Kieran's hand brushed against hers, then gently took it. Victoria knew she should pull away, but she didn't. For these few moments, she allowed herself to enjoy the simple pleasure of walking hand in hand under the stars with a man who, despite his wealth and power, seemed genuinely interested in her. The first full day of the retreat began early with a breakfast followed by team-building exercises. Victoria had carefully designed activities that would foster collaboration, while also being enjoyable enough that executives wouldn't feel they were wasting their time. The morning's challenge, a complex puzzle that required communication across different departments, was going well when Victoria noticed one group struggling. The CFO and the head of product development seemed to be at odds, their disagreement threatening to derail the exercise. Before Victoria could intervene, Kieran was there, smoothly mediating between the two executives. She watched, impressed as he found common ground that allowed them to move forward. When he caught her eye across the room, he gave her a quick wink that sent an unexpected thrill through her. By lunchtime, the executives were energized and talking enthusiastically about insights from the morning activities. Victoria moved between tables, gathering feedback and making mental notes for her post-retreat report. When she reached Kieran's table, he pulled out the empty chair beside him. "Join us, Victoria," he said. "We were just discussing how effective your communication exercise was." The conversation flowed easily, with several executives complimenting her planning. Victoria felt a growing sense of pride not just in her work, but in being recognized as a valuable contributor rather than just support staff. After lunch came the outdoor challenge Victoria had been most excited about, a sustainable innovation competition. Teams were given eco-friendly materials and tasked with creating solutions to real-world environmental problems Falcon Industries was tackling. The activity combined team building with practical brainstorming, and the enthusiasm with which the executives approached it confirmed Victoria's belief that work and meaningful play could coexist. Kieran moved between groups, occasionally catching Victoria's eye with a warm smile that seemed reserved just for her. During a brief break, he found her reviewing notes by the refreshment table. "This is going exceptionally well," he told her, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "You've managed to get my most stubborn executives playing well with others a minor miracle," Victoria laughed. "The secret is making them forget they're learning." "Exactly why I needed you here," Kieran replied, his hand lightly touching the small of her back. "Are we still on for the boat this evening?" "Yes," Victoria answered without hesitation. "Though I should warn you I have no rowing experience." "Fortunately, I do," Kieran said with a smile. "Meet me at the dock after dinner," Victoria nodded, already looking forward to it more than she should. The afternoon continued with strategic planning sessions, but Victoria found her thoughts repeatedly drifting to her upcoming evening with Kieran. By dinner time, she was both nervous and excited, barely tasting the excellent meal as she went through the motions of professional conversation with executives. As the group dispersed for evening free time, some heading to the resort's bar, others to their cabins for early rest, Victoria slipped away to her room to freshen up. She changed from her business casual attire into a simple sundress, applied a touch of lip gloss, and headed toward the lake. Kieran was already at the dock, the small rowboat ready beside him. He'd also changed, wearing casual khaki shorts and a white linen shirt that made him look younger and more approachable than his usual corporate attire. "You came," he said, sounding genuinely pleased. "Did you think I wouldn't?" Victoria asked, stepping onto the dock. "I thought you might reconsider the professional implications," Kieran admitted, helping her into the boat. "I'm glad you didn't." The boat rocked gently as Kieran settled opposite her and began rowing them away from shore. The evening was perfect, warm with a light breeze, the setting sun painting the sky in vivid oranges and pinks. "I used to row in college," Kieran explained as they glided across the water. "Not competitively, just for pleasure. There's something meditative about it." Victoria watched him, struck by how different he seemed here, relaxed, open, almost vulnerable. "You're not what I expected," she admitted. "What did you expect?" Kieran asked, his strokes steady and rhythmic. "The cold, demanding billionaire from the business magazines," Victoria said honestly. "The man who made 3 department heads cry last quarter." Kieran winced. "That's not my finest moment, though in my defense they had completely ignored safety protocols on the Singapore project." "So the rumors are true," Victoria teased. "Some of them, perhaps," he acknowledged with a rueful smile. "I can be demanding when it matters, but that's not all of who I am." He paused his rowing, allowing the boat to drift in the middle of the lake. "What you see in the office is the CEO, not necessarily the man." Victoria considered this. "And which one am I with now?" "Just Kieran," he said simply. "A man who's been captivated by a brilliant, beautiful woman since she first challenged his idea at a staff meeting 3 years ago." Victoria's eyes widened. "You remember that? It was my first month at Falcon. You suggested my conference theme was corporate pretension masquerading as innovation," Kieran reminded her, his eyes crinkling with amusement. "No one speaks to me that way." It was refreshing. "I was terrified afterward," Victoria admitted. "I thought I'd be fired." "Instead, I changed the theme," Kieran pointed out. "Because you were right. That's when I started watching your career at Falcon." As the sky darkened and stars appeared, their conversation deepened. Victoria learned about Kieran's childhood in a working-class Boston neighborhood, his scholarship to MIT, and the personal loss that had driven his passion for renewable energy. His mother had died from respiratory complications after years, living near a coal plant. In turn, Victoria shared her own story, growing up in a small town in Pennsylvania, putting herself through college with scholarships and part-time jobs, and her determination to prove herself in the corporate world without family connections or advantages. "That's what I admire about you," Kieran said as their boat drifted gently on the moonlit water. "Your determination, your integrity. You've earned everything you've achieved." "Unlike some who think I've slept my way to success?" Victoria asked, raising an eyebrow. Kieran looked troubled. "Has someone at Falcon implied that?" "Not yet," Victoria said. "But if people see us together like this, they might." "Then we'll be careful," Kieran promised. "I would never want to undermine your professional reputation, Victoria, but I also don't want to pretend I'm not attracted to you." As he spoke, he moved to sit beside her on her bench, the boat rocking slightly with his movement. Up close, Victoria could see the sincerity in his eyes, feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I'm attracted to you too," she admitted softly. "I have been for a long time, but it's complicated." "Life is complicated," Kieran agreed, his hand finding hers. That doesn't mean we can't find moments of simplicity. In the quiet darkness of the lake, with only the moon and stars as witnesses, Kieran leaned forward slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Instead, Victoria met him halfway, her lips finding his in a kiss that started tentatively but quickly deepened with shared desire. When they finally broke apart, Victoria was breathless, her heart racing. That was long overdue, Kieran finished, his forehead resting against hers. And something I'd very much like to do again. But not if you have regrets. Victoria considered the situation, the professional complications, the potential gossip, the power differential that couldn't be entirely erased despite Kieran's best intentions. But against all these concerns was the undeniable connection she felt with him, stronger than anything she'd experienced before. No regrets, she decided, kissing him again briefly. But we should take this slowly and discreetly. Agreed, Kieran said, reluctantly moving back to his rowing position. Starting with getting back to shore before someone sends out a search party for the missing CEO and event coordinator. As they rowed back toward the twinkling lights of the resort, Victoria felt a mix of emotions: excitement about this new beginning with Kieran, anxiety about maintaining professionalism during the retreat, and an underlying happiness she couldn't suppress. The remaining days of the retreat passed in a blur of scheduled activities and stolen moments. During daylight hours, Victoria and Kieran maintained professional distance, their interactions appropriate and focused on the retreat's success. But in the evenings, they found ways to be alone: another boat ride, a walk through the resort's nature trail, quiet conversations on the balcony of Kieran's luxury cabin after the other executives had retired for the night. Each private moment deepened their connection. Victoria discovered Kieran's surprising sense of humor, his passion for environmental causes beyond business interests, and his loneliness despite his success. Kieran learned about Victoria's dreams of eventually starting her own event planning company, her close relationship with her grandmother who had raised her, and her secret talent for watercolor painting. On the final night of the retreat, after a celebratory dinner where the executives toasted to one of their most successful gatherings, Kieran invited Victoria to his cabin for a nightcap. "Just to talk," he assured her when she hesitated. "The retreat has kept us so busy. I feel like I've barely had time to really be with you." Victoria agreed, knowing that tomorrow they would return to New York and the corporate hierarchy that separated them. Tonight might be their last chance to simply be Kieran and Victoria before becoming Mr. Frost and Miss Zimmerman again. Kieran's cabin was the most luxurious at the resort, with a spacious living area, fireplace, and private hot tub on the deck overlooking the lake. He poured them each a glass of wine and they settled onto the comfortable sofa, the distance between them smaller than propriety would dictate but not yet touching. "The retreat has been a remarkable success," Kieran said, raising his glass in a toast. "Thanks entirely to you." Victoria clinked her glass against his. "Not entirely. Your innovation workshop by the lake was inspired. I've never seen the executive team so engaged." "We make a good team," Kieran observed, his eyes holding hers over the rim of his glass. "We do," Victoria agreed, feeling the weight of tomorrow's return to reality. "But what happens when we go back? We can't exactly continue boat rides and midnight walks in Manhattan." Kieran set his wine glass down and took her hand. "I've been thinking about that. I want to continue seeing you, Victoria, but I also understand your concerns about appearances at work." "It's not just appearances," Victoria pointed out. "There are real professional complications. What if things don't work out between us? Or what if they do, but people assume any success I have is because of our relationship?" "Valid concerns," Kieran acknowledged. What if I told you I've been thinking about restructuring the events department, making it a separate division that reports directly to the COO rather than to me? Victoria narrowed her eyes. Are you trying to solve this by changing the entire corporate structure? Partially, Kieran admitted with a sheepish smile. But it's actually something I've been considering for months. The events team has grown and it makes more sense organizationally. It would mean your direct reporting line wouldn't include me. That would help, Victoria conceded. But people would still talk. People always talk, Kieran said, moving closer to her on the sofa. What matters is whether what we have is worth weathering a little gossip. He reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. These past few days with you have been the happiest I've had in years, Victoria. I don't want to go back to just being your boss. The vulnerability in his voice touched something deep within Victoria. Despite her reservations, she couldn't deny the connection between them, a connection that felt too significant to abandon for fear of complications. I don't want that either, she admitted softly. Kieran's kiss was gentle at first, then more insistent as Victoria responded with equal passion. Unlike their previous moments together, there was no need to rush, no fear of discovery. They had the night to themselves, and they made the most of it talking, laughing, sharing hopes and fears between increasingly passionate embraces. When Victoria finally returned to her own cabin in the early morning hours, her lips swollen from Kieran's kisses and her heart full, she knew something fundamental had changed. Whatever challenges awaited them in New York, she was committed to exploring this unexpected connection with Kieran Frost. The return to Manhattan the next day brought an abrupt shift back to professional reality. Victoria traveled back with several executives in one of the company cars, while Kieran took the helicopter with the CFO and legal counsel to attend an emergency meeting. His parting words to her had been brief but meaningful. This isn't ending. It's just beginning. The first week back at Falcon Industries tested Victoria's resolve to keep her relationship with Kieran professional at work. He was immediately swept into crisis management with an overseas project. Their interaction limited to formal emails about the retreat follow-up report. By Friday, Victoria was beginning to wonder if their connection at Whispering Pines had been a beautiful illusion until her phone buzzed with a text from Kieran late in the afternoon. Dinner at my place tonight. Car will pick you up at 7. Bring overnight things if you'd like. Victoria stared at the message, her heart racing. This was different from their resort encounters, more intimate, more definitive. After a moment's hesitation, she typed back, I'll be ready at 7. Kieran's penthouse apartment occupied the top 2 floors of an exclusive building in Tribeca. Victoria had never seen his home before, and she was struck by how it reflected his personality, modern and impressive, but with unexpected warmth in the art choices and comfortable furnishings. Welcome, Kieran greeted her at the door, looking refreshingly casual in jeans and a soft gray sweater. He drew her into a kiss before she could even set down her overnight bag. I've missed you. It's only been 5 days, Victoria pointed out, though she'd missed him equally. 5 days too many, Kieran replied, leading her inside. I would have reached out sooner, but I wanted to give you space to process everything from the retreat, and I needed to set some things in motion. Victoria raised an eyebrow. What things? The department restructuring, for one, Kieran explained, handing her a glass of wine. As of Monday, the events team will report to Rebecca Chen, the coup. I've already spoken with HR about the change. Victoria was impressed by his decisiveness, but still concerned. Won't people find the timing suspicious? They might, Kieran acknowledged, which is why I've backdated the proposal to 3 months ago and included it as part of a larger organizational efficiency plan. The documentation shows it's been in the works for some time. You've thought of everything, Victoria said, following him to the kitchen where delicious aromas suggested he'd been cooking. I've tried, Kieran admitted, checking something in the oven. Because you were right about the professional complications. I want to minimize those as much as possible without hiding how I feel about you. The simple dinner Kieran had prepared pasta with a sauce he'd learned to make during a summer in Italy, was served on his terrace overlooking the city lights. Their conversation flowed as easily as it had at the resort, but with a new layer of intimacy that came from the knowledge that they were actively choosing this relationship, despite the complications. After dinner, as they settled on the comfortable outdoor sofa with glasses of dessert wine, Kieran brought up the future. I've been thinking about how we move forward, he said, his arm around Victoria's shoulders. I'd like us to date properly dinners, shows, weekends away when our schedules allow, but I'm also aware of your concerns about your professional reputation. Victoria leaned into his embrace, considering. I don't want to hide as if we're doing something wrong, she decided. But maybe we could be discreet initially. Give the department restructuring time to settle before we're seen publicly as a couple. That seems reasonable, Kieran agreed. Though I warn you, I'm not known for my patience. The idea of not being able to take you as my date to the charity gala next month is already testing my resolve. Victoria laughed. I'll probably be working that event anyway. One of us has to make sure it runs smoothly. All the more reason you should be at my side, Kieran argued playfully, pulling her closer. But I'll respect your timeline. Just don't make me wait too long to show the world how lucky I am to have found you. The night they shared afterward was everything Victoria had imagined during their brief moments together at the resort: passionate, tender, and surprisingly comfortable, despite it being their first time together. Kieran was both considerate and ardent, his desire for her evident in every touch. Lying in his arms afterward, Victoria marveled at how quickly life could change. A month ago, Kieran Frost had been her intimidating billionaire boss. Now, he was simply Kieran, the man who made her coffee in the morning, who listened intently when she spoke, who looked at her as if she were the most fascinating person he'd ever met. The weeks that followed established a pattern to their relationship. At work, they maintained professional distance, though Victoria occasionally caught Kieran watching her in meetings with an expression that made her blush. Outside the office, they spent as much time together as their busy schedules allowed: quiet dinners at Kieran's penthouse, weekend mornings at Victoria's favorite brunch spot in her neighborhood, and long walks through the city discovering each other's favorite places. As they'd agreed, they kept their relationship discreet, though not secret. Victoria confided in her closest friend at work, Megan, while Kieran informed his executive assistant, Elaine, who needed to know his whereabouts. 6 weeks after the retreat, Falcon Industries held its annual charity gala, a prestigious event Victoria had been planning for months alongside her regular duties. The evening of the gala, she was in professional mode, overseeing last-minute details at the venue when Kieran arrived early, handsome in his tuxedo. Everything looks perfect, he told her, finding a moment when they were relatively alone. Though not as perfect as you. Victoria smoothed her black evening gown, a designer piece she'd splurged on for the occasion. Careful, Mr. Frost. Someone might think you're flirting with your event coordinator. Former event coordinator, Kieran corrected with a smile. Current director of the newly independent events division, reporting to the COO. The department restructuring had gone smoothly, with Victoria receiving a promotion in the process, a promotion Kieran had insisted was based entirely on merit, and would have happened regardless of their personal relationship. Still, Victoria cautioned, though she couldn't help smiling at his appreciation, we agreed to be discreet. And we have been, Kieran pointed out, for 6 weeks. But I've been thinking. I'm giving a speech tonight thanking donors and announcing Falcon's new sustainability initiative. What if I also introduced you not just as the event organizer, but as the woman I'm dating? Victoria's eyes widened. Kieran, that's not discreet. That's announcing our relationship to the entire New York business community. Exactly, he said, his expression serious now. I'm tired of pretending I'm not completely in love with you, Victoria. Victoria froze, her heart pounding. In love with me, completely, Kieran confirmed, taking her hand. I've been falling for you since that first dinner, but these past weeks have confirmed what I already suspected: you're the most extraordinary woman I've ever known. I love your determination, your creativity, your integrity. I love the way you care about people, the way you stand up for what you believe in, even the way you challenge me when I'm being stubborn. Victoria felt tears threatening to form. I love you too, she admitted, the words coming easily now that they'd been spoken. But are you sure about announcing this tonight? Once it's public, there's no going back. I don't want to go back, Kieran said simply. I want to move forward with you. Unless you're not ready, Victoria considered the situation. The department restructuring had eliminated the direct reporting issues. Her promotion had been recognized as deserved based on her work with the retreat and other successful events. And most importantly, she knew what they had was real, not a workplace infatuation or a power dynamic, but a genuine connection between equals who happened to meet at work. I'm ready, she decided, but let me handle my duties first. This gala needs to be perfect regardless of our personal announcement. Kieran's smile lit up his face. It will be. You've planned it, after all. The gala proceeded flawlessly, with New York's elite enjoying the sophisticated atmosphere Victoria had created. When it came time for Kieran's speech, Victoria stood at the back of the ballroom, watching with pride as he eloquently described Falcon Industries' commitment to sustainable energy and environmental responsibility. Then, as promised, he shifted topics. Before I close, I'd like to acknowledge the person responsible for tonight's successful event, Victoria Zimmerman, our newly appointed Director of Corporate Events. Polite applause followed as Victoria felt all eyes turned toward her. She smiled professionally, expecting Kieran to move on. Instead, he continued. Many of you know Victoria from previous Falcon events, but what you may not know is that she's also the woman who has completely transformed my life over the past 2 months. A murmur ran through the crowd as Kieran's meaning became clear. We met as colleagues, but fate had other plans. Victoria, would you join me up here? Victoria hesitated only briefly before making her way to the stage, her heart racing. As she reached Kieran, he took her hand in his. I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce Victoria not just as a valued Falcon executive, but as the woman I love and hope to build a future with. The announcement was met with surprised applause and curious whispers. Victoria's cheeks burned, but Kieran's steady gaze gave her confidence. Thank you for your support, Kieran concluded, addressing the crowd again. Both of Falcon's mission and, I hope, of our happiness. As they left the stage together, Victoria squeezed Kieran's hand. That was quite an announcement. No going back now. No going back, Kieran agreed, looking utterly content with that fact. Only forward. The months that followed brought adjustments as they navigated their public relationship alongside their professional lives. There was gossip, of course, but it faded as it became clear that Victoria's position had been earned through merit, and that Kieran was seriously committed to her. Victoria thrived in her new role, expanding the events division and implementing innovative approaches that furthered Falcon's reputation for excellence. Kieran continued to lead the company with vision and determination, though Victoria noticed subtle changes in his leadership style: more patience with new ideas, more willingness to delegate, more balance between work and personal life. On the first anniversary of the retreat that had brought them together, Kieran surprised Victoria with a return to Whispering Pines Resort. They arrived by helicopter, just as they had a year before, but this time openly as a couple rather than as boss and employee. "I can't believe it's been a year already," Victoria said as they walked toward the lake where they'd shared their first kiss. "So much has changed." "For the better, I hope?" Kieran asked, guiding her toward the dock where a familiar rowboat waited. "Definitely for the better," Victoria affirmed. "Though I never imagined when I was planning this retreat that I'd end up falling in love with the intimidating CEO. And I never imagined when I was reviewing your retreat proposal that I'd find the woman I want to spend my life with," Kieran replied, helping her into the boat. As they rowed to the center of the lake, the setting sun painting the sky in brilliant colors just as it had a year ago, Victoria was struck by how right this felt being with Kieran, building something meaningful together. When they reached the middle of the lake, Kieran stopped rowing and moved to sit beside her on the bench, just as he had during their first boat ride. "I brought you back here for a reason," he said, taking her hands in his. "This is where everything changed for us. Where I finally got the courage to show you how I felt." Victoria smiled at the memory. "Our first kiss." "Yes," Kieran agreed, "and I'm hoping it will be the place of another first." Before Victoria could ask what he meant, Kieran reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught as he opened it to reveal a stunning emerald-cut diamond ring. "Victoria Zimmerman," Kieran said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "This past year with you has been the happiest of my life. You've challenged me, supported me, and loved me in ways I never thought possible. You see me not the billionaire or the CEO, but the man, and I want to spend the rest of my life seeing you, supporting you, and loving you." He took the ring from its box. "Will you marry me?" Tears of joy sprang to Victoria's eyes. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you." As Kieran slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a kiss that echoed their first one in this very spot, Victoria marveled at how life's unexpected turns could lead to its greatest joys. She had come to Whispering Pines a year ago to plan a corporate retreat, never imagining she was actually planning the first steps toward her own future, a future with a man who had been watching her, appreciating her, and falling in love with her long before she knew his heart. The boat rocked gently beneath them as they sealed their engagement with another kiss, the setting sun gilding the water around them. In that perfect moment, Victoria knew that while she might have planned the retreat, Kieran had been planning something far more important: the beginning of their life together. When they returned to the dock, hand in hand and glowing with happiness, the resort staff were waiting with champagne and congratulations, another surprise Kieran had arranged, confident in her answer. "How did you know I'd say yes?" Victoria asked as they celebrated in the resort's private dining room, surrounded by candlelight and flowers. "I didn't," Kieran admitted. "I hoped. But with you, I've learned not to take anything for granted. You're not impressed by wealth or power. You care about who I am, not what I have. It's one of the countless reasons I love you." Their engagement made headlines in the business press: Billionaire Energy CEO to wed company executive, but neither of them paid much attention to the outside noise. They were focused on building their future together, one that would blend Victoria's creativity and Kieran's vision in both business and personal life. They were married 6 months later in an intimate ceremony on the grounds of Whispering Pines Resort, with the lake where they'd shared so many significant moments as their backdrop. Victoria's grandmother sat in the front row, beaming with pride, while Kieran's closest friends from his pre-billionaire days stood as his groomsmen. In her vows, Victoria spoke of how planning a retreat had unexpectedly led her to the love of her life. In his, Kieran admitted that the retreat had been part of his long-term plan to get to know her better, away from the corporate environment, where he'd first become captivated by her intelligence and spirit. "You planned the retreat," he told her before their assembled loved ones, "but I was planning our future from the moment you walked into my office with that first presentation. Thank you for making both plans come to life in ways more beautiful than either of us imagined." As they shared their first dance as husband and wife, Victoria rested her head against Kieran's chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her cheek. The journey from event coordinator to the wife of a billionaire CEO had been unexpected, but it had never been about his wealth or position. It had been about finding someone who saw her completely, valued her strengths, and loved her without reservation. And as Kieran held her close, whispering promises for their future, Victoria knew that of all the events she'd ever planned, saying yes to this unexpected love had been the most important decision of her life.